Thank you for making some time for this today, Karen. I really appreciate this opportunity to learn from your experience, hear your, advice and tips for both job seekers, but also other career development professionals that might be able to learn from some of the things you've done and learned along the way. Uh,
Mhm.
but the way we like to always start these episodes is by just asking a bit about your career journey. I think it's become everyone's favorite part of the show, and that chance to kind of hear, what has someone else done along the way. I think it's very reassuring to hear that not everyone's path was a straight line.
Yeah, almost no one's is, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
that's what
everyone
I'm
seems to
learning.
have this varied background. Yeah, yeah. In fact, I've listened to a couple, and I really did enjoy discovering that people weren't kind of born to be whatever, that is something that evolves as they evolve over time. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And yeah, what's kind of, some of the stops you've made along the way getting to where you are today?
Well, I don't like calling myself a newcomer to Canada anymore because I've been here for over 30 years, but I do originally come from South Africa, where I was trained as a social worker and with a particular interest in schools. And the time I was there was kind of the end of apartheid. There was a lot of focus on rebuilding a new, better society, and education seemed to be the best place to do that. So I got involved at that point in forming alternative new educational systems in the country. Well, not on my own, definitely, but just kind of working with people who did that, and had some fantastic opportunities to work with some phenomenal people. And then for multiple reasons found myself here in Canada, and just I did what I tell my clients a story because when I was leaving there to come here, I asked some people if they know anyone in Canada. And
Right.
someone said to me, "Oh, actually, I know this one guy. He's a school principal. Reach out to him." So he was the only name I had. I reached out to him when I got here and I said, "Look, I'm a social worker. I'm looking to work for an NGO," which he laughed at. He said, "There aren't many NGOs in Canada. If you want a job here, you're going to have to broaden it." But he gave me two names, and it landed up being in the organization that I'm now working in.
Oh,
Yeah, so like asking people to give you guidance and being willing to kind of just talk to people. Honestly, was it's such an important tool, and even these conversations you and I are having, listening to other people's conversations, can be an incredibly effective tool for guiding people, for helping people find their way. So
well, I'm glad.
yes. Yeah, so that's what I did. I volunteered where I work now for a year, and not well, maybe less than a year. But after a while, they kind of looked at me and went, "Are you looking for work?" Um, I should have told them sooner, but I landed up getting an offer to work with in a women's program, helping low-income women, kind of building a program that gave them closed the educational gaps for them and helped them kind of get into the workforce. Women who had been out of work long term, like 10 years and more. Yeah, and so that was a great kind of introduction to society here. And then during that time, I went back to U of T, finished my education, got my master's in social work.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, and you know what? They have not been able to get rid of me since. I've had the privilege of working in so many different capacities. I mean, I think another lesson I've learned is, initially, I kind of felt defensive about the fact that I've been in the same company for 30 plus years, because I keep telling my clients change is good, but
Uh,
I'm not a great role model. But what I think you can do is if you've been there long enough and you're willing to take risks, you can carve out pieces in your jobs that work well for you. I mean, you've done that in what you do, right? You kind of create something, and sometimes you can do it entrepreneurially, but sometimes you can do it within the place you work. And so as new opportunities came up, opportunity to do some social media in our organization, I was interested in that because I've done some writing and some kind of journalism a little bit. And so I took that on, and then they wanted someone who'd been here for a long time to consult to another organization, and I took that on. And so at this point, I work here in 3 different roles, including social media, employment counseling, and some consulting to some of our partners. And that's a lovely niche. I like variety. I desperately need variety, which is a weird thing to say for someone who's been in the same position for all these years, but I've really made it my own. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. story, Karen, and you're the perfect person for the show to be interested in social media and employment services and consulting. So I'm very grateful you made time for us
Mm,
today. And I agree. I think it's I feel the same way. I need that kind of variety as well. And I think it's a great reminder that yeah, that the change is really worth thinking about, but it doesn't have to be an entire industry change. It can be within the same organization, like you're saying. That's kind of how
mm,
this podcast even started was, all right, like what's something different we can do?
right.
Um, and yeah, it builds on a skill set that I'm excited to develop. And so I completely agree with you on that front there. And um, I want to go back to something you said earlier that I do think is really worth spending some time on, and it's that idea of asking people for support and help, especially for newcomers who I know are looking for that. Uh,
Mm,
I think that's the same for many domestic job seekers as well, but I can see it being more urgent for newcomers who truly don't have any network or infrastructure or
mm.
support here. Uh,
They, they they face multiple challenges, right? They don't just face the challenge of not knowing anyone, but they also face the question of what's appropriate, like what is culturally acceptable. So it really is hard for a newcomer to kind of, network. Everyone says network, but how, where, what do I say, right? Mm,
exactly. And that is something I would love to talk to you more about because it is the go-to advice. You got to meet people, you got to get out there, you got to build your network. But where do you recommend, what are some starting points? And I know there's more than one,
mm.
but what are some starting points that have come to mind for you over the years? And what kind of things can we suggest to, it doesn't just have to be newcomers, but anyone who is looking to develop their network?
Right. There are a lot of equivalencies that I always help my clients draw between whether you're a newcomer or you're just changing fields or you suddenly, things have changed for you. You've moved physically within the country. Anytime you're leaving a network behind and having to rebuild, it's a challenge. And the other challenge is personality type, right? Some people are outgoing and very comfortable networking. And I suspect those of us who tell everyone to network are more comfortable doing it ourselves. And we tend to there's almost a form of kind of ableism there that not everyone is the same, and people who are maybe neurotypical or just introverts might not feel that comfortable reaching out to strangers and knowing what the right socially acceptable thing to say is. So one of the things that I recommend to people is to find spaces that you're comfortable doing that in. So for example, for me, I'm actually pretty much an introvert. And so this idea of finding myself volunteering somewhere and sitting around the lunch table with potential colleagues was much more comfortable than knocking on some stranger's door. And the person whose door I originally knocked on was someone new and actually was a family friend, so that was easy. So you have to start at the soft points of your network, right? The places where maybe you know someone, maybe you're connected to that network because your kid goes to that school, so there's people like the teacher. So I always say to people, start with who you know. I do a lot of LinkedIn training, and I'm a big fan of telling people to think of the LinkedIn model. LinkedIn always says start from the people you know, reach out to people in your address book, right? Because it could be that the person you know doesn't at all have anything to do with your field, but maybe they know someone who does, or maybe they know someone who knows someone who does, And LinkedIn's nice in that it kind of uncovers those connections for you, kind of using algorithms, but you can do that in real life. And so talking to your kid's teacher, I remember speaking to my son's soccer coach and discovering that he was a recruiter, which was really helpful to some of my clients. There are people out there who, the person who cuts your hair, boy, if there's ever a well-connected person,
That's true.
it's that's the person who cuts your hair. And so I really think people need to kind of start with where they're comfortable and not feel like either you network in one of these big events where you kind of shake people's hands and introduce yourself or not at all, because I think that actually probably it's more effective to go for the soft, easy spaces. So whether it's a social connection you've made or just any space. And that's why volunteering is nice, because if you start by volunteering, you get to know people organically, and then you can have those conversations without having to thrust yourself in their face, which is what immigrants and many people just find so uncomfortable doing.
Absolutely. And that's a great example of the way you approached it by volunteering first. And what it's making me think is that, like you said, right, it doesn't have to be, let's say you want to work for a hospital, you volunteer at a hospital, you could volunteer at an event you're interested in.
Mm,
People you meet there might work at the hospital. And so just like just being part of different events and opportunities,
right.
like talking to your hairdresser,
Right.
they're day-to-day activities that,
Yeah.
yeah, not only like maybe you don't meet someone from your hairdresser, but you get better at speaking to people.
And
Oh,
maybe your hairdresser does know someone, right? My
yeah,
hairdresser constantly taps in. She knows what I do. And she goes, do you know someone who's, because I've got a client who is. So, the thing is, you want to find the people in your life who are generous in that way.
mhm,
And some people are more comfortable doing that. And the people who are kind of responsive and generous are the ones that, I remember arriving as an immigrant and being totally overwhelmed by the supermarkets here where I came from. We didn't have 10 different kinds of soap. There was like 2 soaps. You had to just choose one. And someone came with me, just a family friend, and she just showed me around. And that made it more easy. So sometimes you just need someone who's just willing to talk to you and share the insights. And I also encourage people to never think they've done enough of that. Like you can always talk to someone else again. And even if they do the same job, if you're networking in a field, you speak to someone else who does exactly the same work, you'll get a different perspective, as you've learned in your work, right? Every person has a different story. And so, yeah, start with where it's easy. And the only pushing that a newcomer needs to make, or anyone, is to force yourself out of the comfort of your own four walls, right? Electronically, if you're using LinkedIn, but in person, even better, join a tennis club. I mean, I had a client who ended up getting a job because she had an accident where a tennis ball hit her on the nose in a tennis court. And the stranger who felt really bad who did this kind of landed up being her employer because she was just chatting. She said to me, you see, even the tennis club worked. But really, like whatever's around you, whatever, it's a religious institution, a sports club, whatever. Join. The joining is the hard part for the introverts, but it's actually easier to do that than knocking on strangers' doors.
uh, it's a great piece of advice, Karen.
Mm.
Thanks so much for suggesting that. And I'm getting a haircut this evening, so I'm going to talk to my hairdresser and see who he knows. Um, but seriously, it's so true. And I like that you've mentioned that again, it could be anything you're interested in. So if you're new to the country, but you played soccer back home, there are
Exactly.
soccer clubs here. There are tennis clubs, like you mentioned. There are entrepreneurship clubs.
Mm.
There's a little community kind of built around going to the movies. And this is where you meet people with like similar interests, and it's a great suggestion. And I do think it's a much more interesting way to build these relationships than, hey, do you have a job? Hey, do you have a job? Hey, do you have a
Yeah, and job offers often come from those conversations if you stay there long enough. I have twins, and when my twins were born, I joined an online kind of parents of multiple birth association, and it didn't take long. It took just a few months of the parents starting to talk about jobs, like, oh, are you going back to your job? Do you have a job? Yes, well, I actually am not, so they're going to be hiring at my company. I think people naturally drift to employment very quickly around the table, sometimes to the great discomfort of unemployed people, right? Because then you feel that, you're kind of being left out of that conversation. But I think that's the other piece, is you have to be comfortable talking about your circumstance and be able to say, yeah, I'm new, I'm looking for work. And to actually make sure that people who you're speaking to out there, no matter who they are, know that. So the fact that it took them a long time at my volunteer place to figure out I was unemployed and looking for work was a mistake of mine. I should have earlier on kind of just said, by the way, I'm looking for work. So if you know anything, there's no shame in doing that. And especially it's even more so now, people are much more comfortable talking about it. If the pandemic taught us anything, unemployment is we're all on the edge of that, and I think people should feel comfortable making sure everyone around them knows they're looking and what they're looking for as well.
I agree. I think that's so true. And it doesn't have to be, yeah, you don't have to be ashamed in any way, especially if you're genuinely interested in the work and you say, hey, I'm curious. I think I could help with that. Or
Mhm.
if anything, I'd be happy to try and add some value in some way. And you reminded me, that's how I got my first job. Is it was through family friends. I was in my first year of university and looking for kind of a summer internship, and my sister mentioned it to her friend, and her
Hmm.
friend's dad worked at an
There you go.
engineering firm, and 3 degrees separation there or something, and yeah, and I ended up working there for 3 years. It was amazing.
Yeah, that is incredible. And if you go sit around a room and ask that question, you'll find that almost everyone in the room has a story like that, where the first job they got came through their uncle, their teacher, their whatever. And the problem is leaving those networks, then you have to kind of start all over as an adult, and it's a little harder. I mean, my son just got something through his dad, right? And so that we do that, and then yes, it's using a bit of nepotism and networks, but it's usually a launching pad, right? And then once you got that, then you kind of go out there on your own, and everyone deserves that first kind of launching pad. And so people need to, yeah, you have to work a little harder when you're in a new place, but you just have to get yourself out there. That is the line. For me, it's just avoid, uh, kind of resist the tendency to avoid and just step out. And anything you do to step out, even if it's a survival job, right? Even if it's, if you're there, talk to people. So any opportunity. I had one client who landed up standing in front of his religious service where he was attending, and asking the person who was leading it, can I just speak to everyone for a minute? And the guy said, sure. And he introduced himself. He said, I'm an accountant. I've just come from this country, and I'm looking. And if they were like, because you're among people who are like-minded, people who want to do good, because that's why they go to this thing. And yeah, like 2 or 3 guys said, come and talk to me and we'll see what we can do. And it landed up, being a great opportunity. So yeah, the risk is to step out there and point out that you're looking, but don't underestimate any network contact you have. It's like on LinkedIn. Don't turn down any connection you have that's out there for you, because you just never know.
That's a really cool story. And yeah, what a brave person. But at the same time,
Mm.
you know, I think we can all find our way to to make the most of a moment like that,
Right, right.
whether it's big or small. So that's a really, really cool example. Now, let's say you do get some of these opportunities. I'm thinking more now, let's say, that gentleman has this opportunity to talk to folks from his community and is now getting ready for an interview or something like that. Do you have suggestions or things that you've noticed work well for job seekers today? Has anything come up? Actually, maybe I'll ask it this way. Is there anything we should suggest to job seekers that they avoid doing? Now they've put themselves out there, they've gotten this opportunity, they're sitting across from someone interviewing
Mm.
them for the job. Have you noticed any, common mistakes?
Well, I think the one thing that people do is that they tend to focus on their weaknesses in their own mind too much, and they tend to overplay them a bit. So, I mean, it's far from me as a white English speaking woman in Canada to say to people, race isn't a thing, age isn't a thing, whatever, because they are very real things. But I think if you overblow them in your mind and you underestimate the capacity of the person interviewing you to see past that, then that's going to affect how well you perform. So, I mean, I've got a client right now. She's in her 60s. She's really worried about how employers deal with her. And we are going to focus on the things that are her strengths and not on that. We're going to work at the fact that she's technologically very skilled, which is often considered, people who worry about age worry about that. So we're going to work with that strength. So one of the things to do is to, acknowledge the challenges you face, but focus on the things you can change, that you do have, the strengths you've got. And, be wary of discrimination and illegal questions and all those things that people can do, but also go in there with a clear, confident idea of who you are and what you've got to offer that will overcome all of those things. Because we know from research that people tend to discriminate less when they get to know someone. So if you are able to talk and share and be open, and make eye contact and be confident, then people tend to very quickly stop noticing those things that they were worried about to start off with. So that's one of the things that I think people need to do, is focus on what they can do. And but the other piece is to be able to talk about your achievements. Well, it's part of the same thing. Talk about them confidently. If they come from another country, it doesn't matter. You don't even focus on that. It doesn't matter where you got that where you made that last achievement in your job. it is still an accomplishment that's going to make a good impression. So the one piece that I encourage people to do, and they definitely don't do enough of, is being able to identify anecdotes from their work history that they can share. So learn to be a storyteller, learn to be able to no matter what the question is, if they're asking you a question that's like hypothetical, like how would you handle this situation, answer with an example of how you did or how you could have, or something similar. If they say the standard behavioral question, which is, give me an example of where you did that and that, well, then that's easy. Yeah, you have them ready. So I always work with people on developing like a list of maybe 5 really good examples of work they've done, accomplishments. It doesn't have to be focused on a particular skill. If you look back and you think of what the things you're most proud of, they are full of demonstrations of a whole range of skills, right? So if an employer says to me, tell me of a time when you took a risk. Well, a whole lot of the examples I can think of include that, So yeah, I think the one thing is people don't kind of prepare with enough stories to tell about themselves, stories that are well crafted, that are not too long, but that are clear. So I tell people to bring notes to interviews. Bring notes in that have everything, the research you've done on the company, but also include a list of all the questions that you want to ask, and a list of all the examples that you're going to be sharing there. And sometimes you can even force those examples in. I always say to people, like when they say, do you have anything else? And you can say, well, I just wanted to tell you about this one thing I achieved. I think it's directly relevant to the position. So, be kind of, just make sure those examples get heard one way or another. So yeah, it's one piece that I don't think we talk enough about with clients, and it's actually a great self-esteem building exercise to look back at your achievements and talk about yourself with confidence, and it gives people, it feels like they fortified a little bit as they enter the interview.
Those are really helpful suggestions, Karen. Both, to focus on your strengths and not, bring your own weaknesses kind of to the forefront by accident,
Mm-hmm.
whether subconsciously even, because I agree, and maybe it's helpful to know, when we do hiring, though it's merit based for us. It's,
Right.
if you're 60 years old and you have a ton of experience in the tech industry, we're excited about that. So I agree, and maybe it's like you said, not spoken about enough. Um,
Mm.
but if you have these great examples and stories to share, um, yeah, that's what employers are looking to hear. And I do think it's a really interesting exercise you mentioned, because I always hear, prepare examples for these questions. Uh, but you kind of put a different spin on it, where you talked about reflecting really on your career and thinking of those stories ahead of time, because I don't think it's common that people, take notes while they're doing these things. And if you've had a long career, can almost guarantee you're forgetting some of the great things you've probably.
Sure. Mm.
Yeah, so it's a great reminder to kind of sit down and go, well, what did I do in that role, and what things am I proud of, and then sort of start to
Exactly.
come up with those stories.
And bring your resume to your interview as well, right? Have your resume, have your notes, your research notes, have your questions, have these anecdotes, have it all ready. And if you see that they notice that you're looking at your notes, just tell them you have notes. Just say, oh, I really wanted to be prepared. I don't want to leave anything out. So, I've got some notes ready. Cannot imagine an employer going, oh, well, there's something wrong with that, right?
Yeah, true.
Yeah, yeah.
No, what
So,
there's nothing wrong with that.
mhm.
That's great. That's a great point. I've always thought, oh, you can't bring notes, but
Yeah, and not only that, I tell people to bring paper and a pen, and if they want to write things down, like when it comes to salary negotiations or a particular point that an employer made is to say, I hope it's okay if I take notes. Again, it's highly unlikely that an employer is going to say no. Just, the old story of making sure you stay in eye contact with the employer and don't spend the whole time, because it's kind of easier to hide at those notes. But most people will be okay as long as you can do it reasonably. It becomes a bit of something they can hold on to almost physically. It
yeah.
becomes a bit of a safety thing. Just to know it's there. You might never look at them, but having them there just is a bit reassuring.
Yeah,
You know.
that's very helpful to know
Mm.
as well. And like you said, right, you're still talking to the person, making eye contact, that kind of thing, but you have these examples here ready. To me, that would show preparation. Uh,
Yeah.
and yeah, interest, true interest in what they're doing, that they've prepared that well. Uh,
Hmm.
Now, I know we only have a couple of minutes left here, so I'm just curious from your viewpoint, kind of having been in this space, for a little bit, like you said. Have you seen any trends recently that point to, popular jobs or in-demand skill sets that we can make job seekers aware of? For those who might be thinking, I want to do something different, I'm not quite sure what.
Mhm.
Are you seeing kind of new opportunities emerge, whether it be specific job titles or specific in-demand skills?
It's a really tough question. And over the years, I've been through kind of media interviews. I did a couple of interviews on CTV, and that was always a question that came up. And you know what? It's a hard one to answer because it depends so much on the individual in terms of what they can work in. So what I encourage people to do is look at our social trends. I mean, one social trend is right technology. And when I say technology, I don't mean learn to code. I think that's bad advice now because unfortunately the machines can code better than we can now. But I encourage people to understand technology really well, as much as they can. Get to understand what AI means, because there are so many jobs now that require a comfort with AI, like get to know, ChatGPT, for example, try it out, get to play with it. You won't believe how much fun you'll have with it, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, so I think that people need to avoid, I mean, to resist avoiding jobs that have tech skills in demand. A lot of the tech skills that you need, and I'm seeing a lot of people who could use just a little bit of tech skills will be enough for them to move in within their own field, where databases are suddenly being in demand and all that. So one thing I would encourage people to do, I mean, I know I'm not directly answering your question, but is to encourage people to kind of really brush up on tech and make sure that they understand the software in their field, to go and check out the jobs in their field where they've got skills. Because unfortunately, making a huge shift sometimes is really expensive, because you'll end up starting at the bottom again. And so, yeah, making a career change is hard. I mean, if you do want to make a career change, look at the trends in our economy. Technology is one, aging boomers, so the whole growing group of like seniors that are going to need a ton of service and actually do have some resources to pay for them. So the jobs in that sector, there's jobs in the food industry, there's a whole lot of shifts. I'm not talking about restaurants, but I'm talking about just just food in terms of manufacturing, the whole, that kind of area. So look at what you can see. There are trends around it, and have do a keyword search on one of the job boards and see what jobs pop up. But yeah, I don't like making specific points, because, for example, in those years, I said education, and then government went and started cutting, right? So sometimes, yes, there's a demand for educational jobs, but there's huge cuts, and so there's still a lot of people out there in that field who still need work, even though there's an increasing demand for education, for special need kids, etc. But I think people, yeah, you need to read the news and have this mindset as you read the news in terms of trends and changes, in terms of what jobs come with that, so it becomes a way of thinking about the world around you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really helpful advice, actually, Karen. Instead of even, a specific field or industry, it's more this having an open mindset to trying some of the things that are, yeah, currently um, kind of in the news or popular, like, ChatGPT. I really like the approach you're talking about here. It's not like go take a course on GPT. It's just try it, see what
Yeah,
you like.
get to know it.
You know,
Yeah.
it's actually a good reminder for me. I was just visiting my sister in California, who I mentioned had got me
Mm-hmm.
my first job. She's quite a bit younger than me, so she's out there using Venmo,
Oh,
and
yeah.
never tried it. And I was like, oh well, I'll give you cash, and I'm gonna check it out now and see, what are some of these new tools and technologies, and it might just spark an idea. So it's a really again, just soft entry point into learning these things, and kind of like
Yeah.
you mentioned with the networking, you can just try them.
Yeah,
You don't, yeah,
sorry.
no, please
Well,
go ahead.
the one point I was going to make, though, is one of the good things to come out of the pandemic, lots of bad things, but the one good thing was the fact that so much education is online now, and so much education has been broken into its component parts. So, for example, if you want to if you're interested in bookkeeping, you don't necessarily have to go do a whole bookkeeping course. You can actually just find online QuickBooks course, and then you can do a course in basic accounting. And most employers don't need you to have a diploma in bookkeeping. They just want you to have the skills you need to get into that field. So it's actually a lot less prohibitive, and it can be done online, and it's cheaper because you can do a course at a time. It costs you a few $100, but you do them slowly. So that's the other piece that I found. If you're interested in AI, there are AI courses out there. They're free courses people can do through the library. They can do them through LinkedIn, which they can also do through the library. There's all these ways of kind of building skills and knowledge, which give you a chance to put those keywords in your resume. So, there's a lot of space to kind of innovate. And I've watched people be incredibly innovative just in taking on courses and, putting themselves out there. And so you can kind of craft your own kind of career path.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll add, that I know I have to let you go, is it kind of comes full circle, because I've noticed with some of these courses, you can reach out to the instructors and they're
Yeah.
teaching this skills, and you can say, hey, I took your course, you know,
Mm.
can I ask you some questions, or can I show you what I've done?
Yeah,
That
excellent.
can take you into a whole new set of opportunities. So
Mhm.
thank you so much for the insights and advice today, Karen. It was a pleasure speaking to you. I hope you'll come back in the future. I feel like I could ask you quite a few more questions here.
Anytime, it's been an absolute pleasure. I kind of feel like we didn't even get into a lot of what we could discuss. I'm looking forward to watching more of your content, and
Thank you.
honored to be part of all of this. Thank you.
Oh, I really appreciate that. And absolutely, I'd love to have you back on. And I agree, the time always goes too quick. So um, I will 100% reach back out to get you back on here, Karen. I'm sure people will want to hear more from you as well. Um, but yeah, thank you for today. And I hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thank you. You too. Good luck
Awesome.
with that haircut.
Thank you. Yeah, let's see who
Okay.
my hairdresser knows.
Yeah.
Have a good one, Karen.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye.